Growing up in a family steeped in the medical profession, I always believed becoming a doctor was my inevitable path. From a young age, I dedicated myself to my studies, consistently earning top grades. However, for my father, a seasoned doctor himself, excellent grades weren't sufficient unless they were nationally recognized. His relentless expectations wore on me over time, and I began to resent the very idea of a medical career. My name is Isabella. Both my parents and a host of relatives are doctors. It was assumed that my sister Aurora and I would follow suit. Aurora, who is 5 years my senior, seamlessly stepped into the role of the accomplished doctor, much to the delight of our parents. She was the golden child, effortlessly excelling and always showered with praise, even for the smallest accomplishments. In contrast, I constantly faced comparisons with Aurora. Any shortcoming on my part was seen as a personal failure rather than a natural difference given our age gap. As Aurora thrived, I felt increasingly sidelined. When she was under pressure, her stress often manifested in verbal outbursts or even physical aggression towards me, but I kept silent, knowing my parents would take her side. Though I attended a prestigious college preparatory school, the dream of college faded for me amidst the ongoing strife at home. I decided to forge a different path. After graduating high school, I quickly moved out, having saved enough from part-time jobs to support myself initially. I secured a live-in position at a hotel in a tourist hotspot, eager for a fresh start. Obtaining my parents' consent to leave while still a minor was surprisingly easy. They seemed eager to rid themselves of what they deemed a failure. Months passed without contact with my family. Then, as the year drew to a close, my father called, inviting me home for the Fort Worth celebration with our relatives. The invitation was unexpected, considering the silence that had stretched between us. "Daddy wants you to host," he said, before abruptly hanging up the phone. It was a command, not a request. At home, hosting the Fort Worth's feast was a long-standing family tradition where all our doctor relatives gathered. For me, these gatherings were nothing short of excruciating. I was invariably tasked with every menial job, from cleaning the house the day before, to preparing food, drinks, baths, and futons for the overnight guests. Mom simply issued commands, while Aurora, as usual, pretended I didn't exist, often questioned why these responsibilities always fell to me, especially since I felt an undercurrent of guilt for not following in the family's medical footsteps. It seemed easier to comply than to contest. Despite having left home and thinking I'd escaped these duties, my father's call pulled me back. I agreed to return, but planned a brief visit due to the demands of the peak season at the hotel where I worked. I couldn't afford a lengthy break. I arrived home to immediate criticism from my father. "You're late. Everyone's arriving soon. Why didn't you come yesterday?" he demanded. Work had made it difficult to take even one day off, but my explanation fell on deaf ears. "Stop making excuses and get ready," he commanded, entering the house. There was no sense of homecoming relief. My mother was ready with a list of tasks. I got to work for cleaning, cooking, preparing drinks. As the relatives arrived and the celebration commenced, I remained on the periphery. Their conversations, filled with complaints about the hospital and gossip about patients, were alienating. It seemed that becoming a doctor made it a norm to speak ill of others. Aurora thrived in this atmosphere, eagerly joining in the disparagement of fellow doctors and patients. As I served drinks, my cousin Andrew cornered me. "So, Isabella, being a doctor was too tough for you, huh?" he smirked. His words disgusted me. I wanted to tell him that I hadn't failed to become a doctor, I had chosen not to. I didn't want to be someone who relished belittling others. But I held my tongue, knowing that responding would only sap my energy further. As night fell, I escaped the toxic environment of my family home. My departure was met with complaints about who would handle the cleanup. In the silence of my departure, I felt relief, knowing that distancing myself from that world was the healthiest choice I could make. I excused myself from lingering at the family gathering, saying I needed to work early the next day. Without even packing extra clothes, I rushed out to catch the bus back. This brief visit marked my only interaction with my family for the entire year. Every year, I begrudgingly took a day off, made the trip home, and returned promptly. It was tiresome, but I managed since it was just once a year. I reasoned that, having lived at home until high school and them funding my prep school, showing up annually was the least I could do. 7 years had elapsed since I first left home, and now at 29, my routine visits hadn't changed. It was that time of year again, and I was expecting a call from Dad any day. But when my phone finally rang, the caller ID flashed an unexpected name, Aurora. It was unusual to receive calls from her, and I answered hesitantly, half expecting bad news about my parents. However, Aurora's tone was unusually bubbly. "Hey, you know the young CEO at your workplace? He's been all over the TV lately, hasn't he?" she chirped, her excitement palpable. This was a new side of Aurora, and it left me both confused and a bit apprehensive. I explained that he had been on TV because he'd opened several new hotels recently. Without missing a beat, Aurora blurted out, "Introduce me to him. I fell in love with him when I saw him on TV the other day. Plus, he's a young master, right? I think he'd suit me." Her words left me speechless. How could she think they'd be a good match? Her tendency to look down on others and her superior attitude would hardly align with someone like him. While I struggled to find words, Aurora pressed on, oblivious to my discomfort. "Oh, I see, you, just a lowly worker, probably don't even get to meet someone like him. I bet he wouldn't even remember you if you did meet, you're so plain." Even though I hadn't responded, Aurora continued, seemingly satisfied with her own narrative. I attempted to cut in, but her relentless stream of assumptions was overwhelming. Finally, she asked, "So, do you know when the CEO will visit your hotel?" Aurora's call, intended to use me as a stepping stone to meet someone she fancied, was an unpleasant reminder of the dynamics that pushed me away from my family in the first place. "I'll stay overnight if I can meet him in person. He won't be able to resist someone like me." "So, book it and cover my stay," Aurora declared with confidence about meeting the young CEO. I was dumbfounded by her audacity. "But Aurora, aren't you involved in arranged marriage meetings? Our family expects us to be settled by 27, and I thought you were already on that path," I managed to ask, puzzled by her sudden change in priorities. "No decent matches, just last week they introduced me to a 31-year-old. Find me someone suitable," she scoffed, dismissing her potential suitors with disdain. It was clear she looked down on them just as she did everyone else. Frustrated and unwilling to facilitate her latest whims, I told her it was impossible and hung up. A month later, on Fort Worth's Day, I returned home for the customary family gathering, planning to keep my visit brief as usual. However, this year the atmosphere was more suffocating than ever. As I moved around serving, Andrew sneered, "You work at a hotel, Isabella? Can't believe you're sticking with such a low-end job." My mother added, "Indeed, we're amazed you manage anything, given it's hardly as crucial as our work." Even my father chimed in, almost relieved, "I'm glad you moved out early. Now, we don't have to explain your choices to the neighbors." "I'm sorry I'm such an embarrassment," I replied, the words heavy with resignation. As their disparaging remarks sank in, Aurora burst into laughter. "You have no redeeming qualities. You'll be alone forever, won't you? What will you do?" she taunted. Her cruelty unexpectedly dissolved my sadness, fueling a defiant spark within me. "Aurora, you're 26, aren't you? 5 years older than me. What will you do if you keep dismissing everyone? You might just get left behind," I retorted sharply. My father's anger flared. "How dare you speak to your sister that way? Apologize now." It was clear as always, Aurora was the favored child. "If that's how it is, I wish you could just be a family of 4 and leave me out of it," I muttered under my breath, turning away from my father's rage. This only seemed to infuriate him more. "What's with that attitude? Who do you think raised you?" he bellowed as I walked away, leaving their criticisms and their narrow expectations behind me. The distance I had put between us felt not only necessary but liberating. As I stood in the entryway, ready to leave the family gathering that had once again proven unbearable, the atmosphere was charged with disapproval from my relatives. Before I could speak, my father's voice rang out harshly, "You are a disgrace to our family. Get out now." His mocking tone was a clear dismissal. Taking a deep breath, I responded with calm finality, "After this year, I won't be coming back." I picked up my belongings and walked towards the door, adding, "Thank you for everything up to now." Just then, the sound of a car pulling up caught everyone's attention. As I opened the door, a luxury car was parked outside. My parents and Aurora, curious about the sudden arrival, followed me out. Aurora was the first to spot the person stepping out of the driver's seat. "You, the president," she gasped. It was Nathan, the president of the company where I worked, the very man Aurora had once asked me to introduce her to. Nathan approached with a confident stride towards the house. Aurora, flustered and suddenly eager, blurted out, "Isabella, could it be that you?" She stopped, likely wanting to ask if I was going to introduce them. I couldn't help but laugh. "Sorry to keep you waiting, I was just leaving," I told Nathan, who returned the smile warmly. "I thought it was about time to come pick you up," he said. Our exchange left my family and the gathering relatives visibly shocked. My father stared at Nathan, completely dumbfounded. As Nathan reached us, he courteously addressed my father, "I apologize for my late greeting." I then leaned in close to Nathan and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear, "He's my fiancé. We're getting married next month." A stunned murmur rose, perhaps from Aurora, or my parents, or both. I continued with a light chuckle, "But I have no intention of inviting you to the wedding. I've realized I have no lingering attachment to this house and likely won't be coming back. This just isn't the place for me anymore." After Nathan had proposed to me, he expressed a desire to meet my parents. I had shared with him the strained dynamics of my family life and the negative things Aurora had inadvertently revealed about the family's reputation. Understanding the situation, Nathan decided it was time to step in. As we left, ignoring the stunned expressions of my family, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This dramatic exit wasn't just a farewell, it was a fresh beginning, free from the shadows of the past. I continued, my voice steady despite the bombshell I was about to drop. "By the way, there's a new hotel opening near Daddy's hospital. I'm involved in the project." During my research, I discovered some unsettling news about the hospital's reputation. It seems there have been multiple instances of medical malpractice and scandals linked to the place where Daddy and Aurora work. "Isn't that right, Dad?" His complexion turned ashen as I spoke. "You're not implicated in these issues, are you?" I prodded gently. The local community is quite taken aback by the hospital's poor reputation. They even have a saying, "Like father, like daughter," when referring to you and Aurora. It's quite shocking to hear, honestly. At that moment, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of responsibility. After all, they were still my family. Yet, I was eager to turn a new page and genuinely contribute something positive to the community with the hotel project. Meanwhile, Dad and Aurora seemed visibly shaken by my revelations, had confided everything to Nathan, my fiancé, and he had been a pillar of support. As we prepared to leave, he quietly opened the passenger door of the car, sparing any further drama. Nathan and I had grown close quite quickly. We met shortly after I left home, during a time when he was working under the previous company president, deeply involved in fieldwork. He told me later that he had fallen for me at first sight. This was a new experience for me, in contrast to my family life, where my efforts were often overlooked. Nathan appreciated my hard work and the joy I took in it. When the previous president fell ill, Nathan stepped up as his successor and proposed to me 8 months ago. His proposal wasn't just romantic, it was a partnership, as he asked for my support in leading the company. Since then, I've immersed myself in business studies, discovering a love for learning that was quite unlike my earlier academic pursuits. I realized that what I truly disliked was studying under the pressure of becoming a doctor, not the act of learning itself. When I found subjects that genuinely interested me, I dove in headfirst, eager to soak up knowledge and apply it in practical ways. As I moved to get into the car, my father's voice halted me. "Hey, Isabella, what's all this about?" I turned with a smile. "I'm no longer a daughter of this house. Goodbye." With that, I stepped into the vehicle, leaving my bewildered family behind. The car pulled away quietly. Later, the new hotel opened to great success, fully booked from day one. I was there, deeply involved in its operations. Then, during one of the busiest days, I noticed my parents and Aurora approaching. Daddy, spotting me among the staff, called out, "We came to see what kind of work you're doing and to stay over. Prepare a room quickly," my father demanded. I was too busy managing the hotel's grand opening to argue, but his nerve stunned me. Nathan, my fiancé, swiftly intervened, asking them to leave, but they made a scene in the lobby. It got so out of hand that I had to call security to escort them out. Just then, Hannah, a nurse from my father's hospital, walked in and exclaimed, "Oh, it's you, the teacher." I later learned she was referring to Daddy, whose arrogance, along with Aurora's, had given them a poor reputation among the hospital staff. Hannah, amused by seeing my father escorted out by security, couldn't help but share the story with her colleagues. The gossip spread, further tarnishing Daddy and Aurora's image at the hospital. Mom had once worked at the same hospital, but her retirement was actually forced due to a scandal. Hannah let that slip during one of her chats with the front desk staff, who happened to be her neighbor and friend. It explained why Mom seemed eager to hide her past. A few days later, my parents and Aurora showed up at the hotel again, even after the security incident. This time, I had no qualms about calling the police. They were arrested for obstructing business, adding to the scandal that was already brewing around my family. Their behavior didn't just affect their reputation. The hospital, already struggling financially, was forced to shut down, unable to survive the negative press and legal troubles. A few weeks later, as I passed by my family's house, it was empty, with a for sale sign in the yard. It seemed they had to sell it out of financial desperation. I also heard that Aurora's arranged marriage meetings had all failed, no surprise given her abrasive personality and the family scandals. With my phone number changed, I was unreachable to them, and I had no intention of re-establishing contact. Life was moving in a new direction, and I had no desire to revisit the chaos they brought. The hotel's opening was a success, and my wedding with Nathan was just around the corner. Both my personal and professional life were brighter than ever. With Nathan by my side, I was excited for a future that was entirely my own, free from the toxic influence of my family.